pagi. Welcome to the latest news from Bali and Indonesia. This is July 18th, 2022, and my name is Bruce, and we're going to take a look at the weather today because I hope the weather where you are is as nice as it is up here. And so let's take a look up on the roof and see, so you can get an idea of what Buleleng looks like today, because wow, it is gorgeous. This is it, the Bali Sea, or the Java Sea, some people call it. and I'll do a slower pan. And the mountains that cut us off from the rest of the island, which can be a good thing or a bad thing depending on your perspective. And the mountains over to the east, and you take those up there to get to Kintamani and then down to Ubud. That's how I go when I go. And so you can see it is just lovely. And the famous ex-harbor. And so that's what things look like today up here on the roof in Singaraja. Okay, you've seen how beautiful it is today, and as I said, I hope it is as lovely where you are as it is here. What's the weather like besides being lovely? Well, it is 29.8 degrees Celsius. Wind speed is 9.4 kilometers per hour on the ocean, and the humidity is 64%. And yeah, there's some clouds as you saw, but it is lovely, lovely day. Okay, good news and bad news today. And well, I always like to start out with the bad news, and so we are going to start out with the bad news. And let's take a look at the numbers. Numbers for yesterday, and remember, yesterday's Sunday, so the weekend numbers are always a little lower. National new cases 3,540, national recoveries 2,574, national deaths 10. Bali new cases 105, Bali recoveries 51, Bali deaths 1. So the numbers still up in mid 3,000s nationally, and Bali is still hovering in between 100 and 150. It was higher the other day. On Saturday, it was almost 150. And on Saturday, we had over 4,000 nationally. And I'm going to talk about that in just a second. So what does this mean for us? Well, it means we may be looking at more restrictions coming. I hope not. Let's take a look at the first story. COVID-19 cases spike as fourth wave takes hold. According to the article in the Jakarta Post, the fourth wave of the COVID-19 infection driven by the highly contagious subvariants BA4 and BA5 recorded 4,329 new infections on Saturday, the highest since March. From July 10th to July 16th, there were 22,684 new cases, a 27.6% jump from the previous week. And there are now a total of 26,594 active cases, which is also up. And according to this article, the figures may not accurately reflect the true scale of the current community infection due to lack of adequate testing. According to the head of the Indonesian Medical Association's COVID-19 task force, he said it looks like we are entering the fourth wave. We really have to be very careful because the spike in cases cannot be underestimated. He added that we overcame the situation months ago, and Indonesia can be said to be quite successful compared with our neighboring countries, but this remains a threat. And as of Saturday, the country's weekly positivity rate, 11.7%, way above the WHO benchmark of 5. So by this time, I think everybody in the world knows that BA4 and BA5 are supposed to be more contagious than previous versions, but less severe in terms of the outcomes for patients. According to Diki Budiman, the epidemiologist from Australia's Griffith University, who I've talked about so many times over the last 2 years, he said that despite BA4 and BA5's high transmissibility, it's unlikely that the current wave will be as severe as the earlier ones. Back a year ago, at the height of the Delta-driven second wave, we were seeing 2,000 deaths a day. On March 8th, the deadliest day of the pandemic since we've gotten the Omicron in, there were 401 deaths. Today, 10, or yesterday, 10. Bogdicki said, in terms of severity, it tends to be lighter. This is not because the virus is weaker, but rather because of communities' better immunity landscape. He warned that the country still needs to work on increasing its immunity by giving the booster, and that only around 25% of the population have received the third shot in Indonesia yet. And I've talked about that a number of times over the past few weeks. And why is the government struggling with this? Because a lot of people think it's over. And so why get it? Why go through the trouble? Why take a risk? There are rumors, of course, as always, people get sicker when they take the booster. The new variants, they can escape the booster, so why even bother? So that's what the government's dealing with right now. The nation's monthly vaccination rollout has decreased by 83% over the past 5 months, from around 29.4 million doses administered in February to only 4.8 million doses administered last month. Public health expert Chanda Yoga Aditama, and I've talked about him before, warned that the current wave of infections would not be the last, and he mentioned the another subvariant, the BA2.75, which I talked about the other day, as one case being found in Korea, and so we've got it in India, Korea, the US, Australia, I think I said. Hospitalization rates still low, 3 to 4%, and most patients are reporting no symptoms or light symptoms. And what does all of this mean? Well, the government has not increased the restrictions yet. We're supposed to be on level 1 here until August. Still got a couple more weeks at level 1, but the government can change anytime they want to. And this is Monday, and if you follow this channel regularly, you know that Monday nights are a favorite time for the government to make announcements and policy changes and all sorts of other things. And so by Wednesday, who knows? Hopefully things will stay the same. I don't want to see us go from level 1 to level 2. While the pandemic curve level remains unchanged, the government's included booster shots in the checklist for domestic travel as part of an effort to ramp up the country's stalling vaccination rate rollout amid the recent uptick in cases. And we're going to talk about that because the booster thing started yesterday. New terms for boarding airplanes and trains, and it should say ships as well, starting July 17th, 2022. So article in CNN Indonesia. As you know, I've talked about this several times before, and well, it seems that the message is finally getting through to people that you do not have to have the booster to get into Indonesia. You do have to be fully vaccinated, however. What about the booster? Well, let's take a look here. CNN's just got a little summary of what these new regulations are. In the new regulations, the government makes a third vaccine or booster condition for traveling by plane, ship, train, private vehicles, public vehicles, crossing between cities and regions throughout Indonesia. So if you're driving around in Bali, yeah, it's not an issue. If you want to go, let's say from Bali to Java, Bali to Lombok, yeah, then you're going to need a booster or you're going to have to get tested. And we'll get to this. So the provision is contained in the circular, the SE, in 21 and 22 that I talked about last week. And they're down here below if you want to look at them in Indonesian. But all you've got to do is take it Google Translate and you can see what's there. So according to the SE, passengers who have received the booster do not have to have any kind of test. You can get on a plane, a train, a ship, a bus, whatever, and no problems. If you don't have the booster, but you've got the 2 shots, okay, you can still travel, but you have to have either the rapid test 1 times 24 hours before departure or the PCR test 3 times 24 hours before departure. If you've only been vaccinated 1 time, then you need to show the results of a negative PCR test, and that's 3 times 24 hours. If you've only had one shot, sorry, you cannot use the antigen test. Passengers with special health conditions or comorbid diseases that prevent them from receiving the vaccine can show or have to show a negative PCR test whose sample is taken 3 times 24 hours before departure, and they have to have an official letter showing that they cannot take the test. The vaccine. Children under 6 are excluded from this. They don't have to show a thing as long as they're with an adult. Okay, and internationally, right? No booster necessary. You got any questions about this? Ask away. And so that's the bad news. The bad news is things are not going well. A positive spin on this is we're still only in the 3,000 to 4,000 numbers, and we haven't really gone up like in Japan or South Korea, Australia, the US. We haven't hit that. Could we? Yes. Would we know? Not necessarily. If people are experiencing no or light symptoms, they're not going to report it, most likely. I know a lot of people that have been coughing and sniffing and sneezing around here and have sore throats, and they just say it's a cold. Could they have the BA4, the BA5? Yeah, quite possibly. Are they going to report themselves? No, they're not. So we don't really know what the numbers are here. Is this going to keep tourists from coming? Is this going to get the government to roll back and go to level 2 or level 3? Let's hope not, because I want to see the schools stay open. I want to see hotels and restaurants and everything working, functioning as normal. Mask wearing outdoors, you still have to do it. Of course, you had to do it indoors, always. Mask wearing outdoors, and well, I don't know about where you are. Leave a comment if you're around the island or even in your country. If you're in Europe, Australia, so many Australians on this channel, let me know about the mask wearing where you are. Here in Singaraja, as I've said before, a lot of people, most people wearing masks. What I'm seeing on social media, on YouTube accounts like Bobo and the Monkeys and Uncle Chan and a number of others that I look at is tourists are not wearing masks, and the mask thing is not being enforced. And so if it's not being enforced, people aren't going to wear them. That's just the way it is. Am I wearing my mask again? Yes. Do I like it? No, I hate it. Will I keep wearing it? Yes, until the government says you don't have to wear it. Okay, let's get on to something else. This is one that is going to drive some people crazy. Pak Luhut has a way to say things, controversial things, that get people's backbones up. Well, Luhut wants domestic tourists to become backbone of tourism industry. I know this is going to irritate some foreigners who are going to say, hey, we contribute so much, and why does Luhut always avoid us? He's always talking about domestic tourists and things. Well, he actually has a good reason here. He said that he wants the domestic tourists to become the backbone of tourism industry is because it creates economic resilience. He said he wants domestic tourism to become 60 to 70% of the industry's backbone. Why? Because he said when these things happen, like COVID and earthquakes, volcanoes, all sorts of natural disasters, terrorism. God forbid we have any more terrorist activities with G20 coming up. But said foreigners stay away, domestic tourists will continue on. Is that true or not? It can be argued either way, I guess. I don't have any figures on it, so I can't really say based on figures. During the early stages of the pandemic, when foreigners were not allowed to come here, did we get domestic tourists? Yeah, we had domestic tourists. Not a lot of them, but there were restrictions on traveling. So once those were lifted, we did get a bunch of domestic tourists coming in. But once the restrictions were lifted, we also got a lot of international tourists coming in. Pak Luhut said that the COVID-19 pandemic had affected the nation's economy due to the inevitable restrictions on foreign tourist arrivals. So if what happened during COVID-19 happens again, the crowd, tourists, will not be depleted, he said. Well, we had restrictions on domestic traveling too. So according to Luhut, the government has continued to integrate tourism activities and calendars in multiple regions to boost domestic tourist arrivals. Among these, the Formula One powerboat racing in Lake Toba, North Sumatra in March of 2023. There are preparations still afoot, he said. This will be akin to MotoGP in Mandalika, so there will be international activities, annual calendars, monthly calendars, weekly calendars to bring tourists to Bali and other tourism areas throughout Indonesia. And so, what have you got to say about this? And some bad news on the tourism front. Airport tax rises. Airplane tickets can be more expensive, right? I've talked about the prices in airline tickets, and they've gone up and up. Well, Ministry of Transportation has increased the tariff for aircraft passenger services, aka the airport tax. However, this increase in airport tax occurred in only 11 airports throughout Indonesia, and I'll mention the ones in a minute. However, Ngurah Airport is not one of the airports that has raised its airport tax. According to the chairman of the Indonesian Aviation Service Users Association, Alvin Lai, the public is being burdened with a surge in flight ticket prices as a result of the increase in fuel prices. Now it's going to be exacerbated by an increase in the airport tax. He complained that airport operators were not open and transparent in announcing the increase, and the increase, he said, should have been widely announced before it was implemented. He said it's very regrettable that airport operators do not transparently announce this increase. So it seems that the flight ticket prices have gone up. So when the flight ticket prices go up, who's going to get blamed? Mr. Lai asked the Minister of Transportation to postpone the implementation of the increase in the airport tax. He wants to see an announcement of at least 1 month before new taxes are implemented. And well, is that going to happen? I don't know. The airport tax apparently has already gone up. And the Minister of Tourism and Creative Economy, our old friend Pak Sandiaga Uno, also got his 2 cents in here, and he said yes, he had received reports of the increased tax, but he said it will help airports adjust their operations to make them more environmentally friendly. Regarding the impact of the increased airport tax on airline tickets, Pak Sandiaga said the government had thought of a solution by increasing the flight frequency of various airlines. Several airlines have been asked to increase the frequency of their flights. I guess if there's more flights, there are going to be cheaper tickets. And so where are the 11 airports that are increasing the airport tax? Surabaya, Semarang, Solo, Jogja, Makassar, Balikpapan, Lombok, Manado, Biak, Sentani. So if you're flying to any of those airports, you might see a little bump in the price of tickets, although it might be so low that you don't notice it. And some good news on airlines. Korean Air operates direct flights to Bali again, now serves 20 international routes. All right, so direct flights coming from Incheon in South Korea to Denpasar. Wow. And the first one came in on the 14th. It arrived at 23:30, and the governor was there to meet it. Boy, the governor stays up late. He's out doing his job. Passengers were greeted with the water cannon and flowers and all sorts of things, and happy. The Korean Air flights use Airbus A333 aircraft, and there were 265 passengers on the maiden landing to Bali. And the plane returned to Incheon at 1:10 in the morning, and there were 113 passengers going from Bali to South Korea. In the future, the Denpasar Incheon PP route will be served every day by Korean Air. Every day, wow. And the general manager of the airport expressed his enthusiasm and appreciation for the return of Korean Air to the island of the gods. And I have a lot of friends in South Korea. Now you can come and visit. And I've wanted to go to South Korea for a long time to watch some baseball games. And so I did a little research last night and looked up price of ticket. Whoa. 11 million. Okay, so pretty expensive. 7 hours from here to there. We may be getting a lot of Koreans coming in soon. Good. And as of July 14th, 2022, Ngurah Airport has served 224,679 international passengers with an average of 16,000 passengers per day. Okay, we're getting up there. According to the general manager, Pak Handi, he said, seeing the trend of international flights that are still showing positive growth, we hope that in the future more international routes will resume operations to the island of Bali. And he said, we're optimistic to achieve the service target of 9 million passengers in 2022. Maybe 9 million total, not 9 million international. And some more on airlines and airports and things like that. Supporting Indonesia's G20 presidency, Bali Ngurah Airport performs terminal beautification. Okay, and you know the island is being spruced up here, getting ready for all the important people showing up here in November especially, but in little meetings before then as well. I've seen any videos recently, I think Damien, when he was going to, where did he go to? Malaysia. You could see that there was some construction going on there, and well, they're putting a lot of Balinese decorations all over and fixing the floors and making the whole place really beautiful and improving the VVIP area. So that is very important for those very, very important people. And so if you've been in the airport recently, notice any changes? Last time I was in the airport was 2018, and my plans to get to the airport again at this point, 0. So leave a comment if you've been to the airport recently. Is it looking better? Is there a lot of work going on? What do you think? And what about education? You know, as a former teacher, I've been very concerned about education, and because of my granddaughter especially. And with the rising number of cases, what is going to happen? Teachers call for clear-cut health protocols as school year starts. As a new school year begins amid an uptick in cases in the country, educator groups and health experts are calling for clear health policies to help keep students safe and prevent school closures. Despite the recent surge in new cases, the government has kept most regencies and cities under level 1. According to the head of Education and Teachers Association, P2G, Iman Zanatul Hari, he said that the government should learn from past mistakes and enforce rigorous and clear-cut health protocols. A failure to do so, he said, would risk school closures and could force students back to online learning, a process that has been problematic throughout the pandemic. He said, we should have learned by now how to deal with the pandemic. He said, schools are ready to follow the government, but the problem is that recent easing of restrictions has made it seem like the pandemic is over to many people. He said, President Jokowi said not too long ago we didn't have to wear any mask outdoors. And then he turned around and changed his mind again. So people are confused. Is this over? Is it not over? And I've talked about this many times, and this is how it's affecting education. Indonesia Teachers Association Deputy Secretary General urged schools to be disciplined in maintaining health protocols and sanitation standards. Schools and teachers must not only maintain health protocols, but maintain them to a high standard. This is important not only for protecting our children from the coronavirus, but from other diseases as well. And the Indonesian Pediatricians Association said last month preventing children from contracting COVID-19 was the best course of action for in-person learning. They said children are particularly susceptible to long-term effects from the coronavirus infection. The association recommended that parents complete their children's vaccinations and urge parents of children with comorbidities to consult a doctor prior to sending them to school. This is the third year to have begun under the shadow of pandemic, which has forced students to conduct large parts of their education online. As it said in this article, and as I've talked about many times before, the online learning, not good at all here. The Education, Culture, Research, and Technology Ministry's Acting Director General for Early Childhood, Basic, and Secondary Education said the government would maintain in-person education to avoid the problems of online learning. According to him, and he's also chair of the Group of 20's Education Working Group, G20 member countries have agreed that in-person learning is necessary to allow students to catch up after 2 years of learning loss. And there's a lot of questions about whether kids are going to be able to catch up and how does that work. In the same webinar, the United Nations Children's Agency, UNICEF, the Chief of Education, Catherine Bennett, said that while online learning had great potential to ensure educational equality in the future, in-person learning remained the most effective option for now. The reality is, she said, we know that children still learn most effectively when they sit in their classrooms, when they're interacting with their teachers and peers. There's no substitute for that. And FMD, foot and mouth disease, right? Big issue in Australia. Here in Indonesia, it's not such a big headline anymore. It was for a little while, and now it's kind of disappeared. Calls to ban flights from Bali amid fears cruel disease will spread. So foot and mouth disease affects pigs, cattle, sheep, and goats. And well, we know it is here in Bali. I've talked about that before. And there are fears that Australian tourists may bring it back with them when they go back to Australia. While humans are not impacted by FMD, if it gets back to Australia, it is going to have devastating effects on the livestock industry in Australia. To ensure that doesn't happen, measures have been put in place to make sure travelers return from Indonesia safely. However, some politicians are causing for drastic measures to be taken. NSW Agricultural Minister said with 103 flights each week from Bali to Australia, foot and mouth disease is the closest it has ever been to our country. LNP Senator Susan McDonald said on Facebook that flights from Bali should be suspended or returning travelers should do 7-day quarantine when they come back. Boy, that will knock out our tourist industry. She said some people say this is an overreaction and will adversely affect the Indonesian economy. It will, but the devastation of foot and mouth outbreak in Australia would be widespread to not just producers, but consumers and taxpayers as well. Senator McDonald said, it's not just the animal health issues, it's a cruel disease. It's the impact of Australian farmers and grazers if they had to destroy healthy animals in a quarantine zone, but consumers would pay more. Food prices will surge if FMD arrives in Australia. She said, getting this wrong and allowing for the disease to enter Australia would be a catastrophic and of biblical proportions. Australians will end up paying more for milk and meat if FMD makes its way into Australia, she said. Federal Agriculture Minister Murray Watt is visiting Indonesia this week to gather more information about how it's containing the spread of the disease. Nationals leader David Littleproud said Mr. Watt's first priority should be to introduce comprehensive screening at Australian airports. Disinfectant foot baths must be introduced immediately at airports to properly treat potentially exposed passengers. However, Mr. Watt's not too keen on giving returning passengers foot baths, saying that advice from biosecurity experts say they're not very effective. If biosecurity experts reckon something will work, then I'm up for it, he said. Okay, Australians, what do you think? Is the government going to ban or restrict flights from Bali? I'd love to hear your comments about this issue. And here's something, well, if you're here, if you live here, or if you're here a lot, you've heard the name Sanglah Hospital, obviously. It is the big government hospital down in the south. Its name has changed. It is no longer Sanglah. And Sanglah was the name that President Sukarno, the first president, gave the hospital. It was the first hospital opened in Bali. Its name has changed. And how do people feel about it? Sanglah Hospital name change. Netizens. It doesn't matter. What needs to be changed is service. So the hospital's name is now R.S. Professor Dr. I Gusti Ngurah Gede Ngurah, and he's apparently a prominent doctor in Bali. The name change took effect on July 7th, and netizens were, well, some were supporting it, others were saying what needs to be changed is not the name, but the service level. According to one netizen, it doesn't matter. We still respect him as a prominent doctor in Bali, but what needs to be changed is the mindset and better service to patients without having to differentiate between poor and rich patients. And people have criticized the hospital for the existence or alleged existence of nepotism in patient care at the hospital. And this morning I read some responses to all this from the director of the hospital, and he said, look, it's a really old hospital and we felt that we needed to do something to make it new, refreshing, more interesting to people, to enhance our spirits, to move us forward, and so we changed the name. No comment. And good news for Buleleng people, and I missed it yesterday. Hooray! CFD in Buleleng enthusiastically welcomed after 2-year absence. CFD is car-free day in Buleleng, and so no cars. We're down in the main road over at Ngurah. There was a lot of stuff going on at the city park. There was music and free vaccinations and food and exercising, and there was a run, and wow, it looked like a lot of fun. I was looking at the photos, and you saw a photo here at the start. It's been stopped for 2 years, and it has started again, and well, according to my lovely wife Sue, it's going to happen again this coming Sunday. And so we've already talked to Zoe, and the three of us are going to make our way over there this coming Sunday and walk down the street with no cars there and see what's happening and do a little video on that and see how much fun that is going to be. Okay, so I'm really pumped about this. Now, I looked at some of the photos and I didn't see a lot of mask wearing there, so I don't know. We'll see what's going to happen this coming Sunday. Okay, that is it for today. If you found this video helpful, useful, informative, interesting, non-irritating, amusing, humorous, consider giving it a thumbs up. We appreciate it. It helps with the YouTube algorithm. And if you haven't subscribed, please consider subscribing. Videos are Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And there is a cooking video on Sunday, but it is no longer on this channel. It is on Sue's own channel. I made her own channel. It's called Dapur Suhana, and you can see where it is right up here. And if you're interested in Indonesian cooking, I would encourage you to go over there, take a look at a new video that we just did yesterday, which is on mee goreng, kind of a special mee goreng, and really, really tasty and easy and quick to make and cheap. 125,000 rupiahs for this huge mass of food that could feed 10 people. So that's what, 12,500 per plate, and that's less than $1 US for all that food. Wow, amazing. So take a look at Sue's video right up there. Thanks for viewing. Be kind to someone today. Stay safe. And I will see you on Wednesday.